Caddo word for your own, a person's own mother as opposed to somebody else's mother is ina, which is, I guess, virtually identical to the Osage word. Osages were, as I said, the traditional enemies of the Caddo. It seemed that Osage women were taken captive and adopted into the Caddo tribe often enough that their word for mother came to be used as a word in the Caddo language. Caddo eventually, well, they learned of the ghost dance from the Arapaho, it seems, and they still refer to the ghost dance with the word nanisana. I don't know much of anything about Arapaho, but Mooney said that this word means in Arapaho, my children. There are a number of borrowings from the three European languages, and I just listed three of them in 9 as samples. The word sunda from French soldat, with a regular substitution of N for L. There's no L in Caddo. Kawaii, obvious from Spanish, and Ika from English acre, which became an important word during land allotments. It's an interesting word because it doesn't show the penultimate lengthening that's characteristic of native Caddo words. If it were a native Caddo word, it would be eka with a long I, but it's pronounced ika, which I guess is closer to the English pronunciation. The Caddo language was pretty much neglected by linguists until the 1950s. And since then, really only 4 people have paid a whole lot of attention to it. I listed them in 10. Daniel de Cruz was an undergraduate linguistics major at Georgetown who studied with Paul Garvin. And while Garvin worked on Wichita in Oklahoma, in Gracemont, which is just north of Anadarko, de Cruz connected with a Caddo woman named Sadie Bedoka Weller and worked for a short period of time with her and made quite a few tape recordings of her, actually. Other Caddo speakers obviously have contributed considerably to what we know about the language, but Mrs. Weller really stands out as the major Caddo consultant. She was born in 1903, and I worked with her about, mostly in the 1960s. She died in 1970. In 1957, de Cruz went back to Georgetown and finished a senior essay on the phonemes of Caddo. But he didn't go any further with linguistics. He went off and started to work for a publishing company, I think, after that. I first went to Anadarko in 1959. At that time, I was making kind of a quick survey of all the Caddoan languages that were still spoken. I started in North Dakota and worked my way south. When I got to the Caddo country, I discovered Mrs. Weller, and after that I got a couple NSF grants to work with her and other Caddo speakers between 1961 and 1965. Since then I've published various articles and things on the language, but I'm feeling guilty at this point. A number of other things have kind of sidetracked me from finishing the bigger description of Caddo I always wanted to do. I had, or the language, you could say, had kind of a lucky break when a young woman named Lynette Melner got interested in Caddo some years back, and she became a graduate student at the University of Chicago and used actually a lot of my materials to write a dissertation on Caddo verb morphology. Some of you may remember it won the Scylla Book Award a few years ago, and it was published at the beginning of this year, just a short time ago, by the University of Nebraska Press. I got copies of it only about 2 weeks ago. And I think I should mention also Brian Levy. Brian was somebody who grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, in the middle of what was once Caddo country. He had a long-standing, I guess, interest all his life in the Caddo and in their language. And in recent years, he spent a lot of time in the Anadarko area doing things to encourage the preservation and spread of the language in whatever ways he could. Unfortunately, he's now living in Stockholm, and so doesn't have any more direct contact with what's going on. And sadly, the number of Caddo speakers is approaching a vanishing point. Just a little bit of a taste of the language. It only has 3 vowels, which you can see in 11. but there are kind of a respectable number of consonants, which you can see on the other side of 11. A number of these consonants, though, have of 12, excuse me. The present consonants are on the left side of 12. A number of them have clearly a secondary origin within Caddo, and it's possible to reconstruct a simpler kind of a pre-Caddo consonant system like the one shown on the right side of 12. The words in 13 are intended to give you just a little taste of what Caddo morphology is like. This is a highly polysynthetic language, and a lot depends on the morphology. I don't have time, obviously, to say much about it. The book by Lynette Melner goes into detail on this. The word in 13a means that some singular third person is hearing something. A verb in the realis mode like this doesn't have third person marked overtly. The second line in A there shows a breakdown into an indicative clitic, an incorporated noun root meaning sound, a verbal element I translated perceived, and a suffix that's glossed as imperfective. There are two things to say about the verbal element there. Most verb roots in Caddo consist of two parts. The main part, which is a B-A-H-W there, and a so-called preverb, the Y-I, which is sort of arbitrarily attached at the beginning. These preverbs belong to a relatively small set, usually monosyllables, and it's possible that some of them at least were once instrumental prefixes or maybe even incorporated noun roots. Only a very few of them seem to have a semantic function anymore. The other thing to notice is that this yi bao by itself means see with your eyes, which is the default perceptual modality. And seeing turns into hearing when you add the incorporated B-A-K before it, meaning sound. Besides being polysynthetic, Caddo is highly fusional, which means there's been a lot of phonological change that's often obscured the internal structure of words. I've had a wonderful time puzzling all of this out. It's been really fun. In 13b, I've listed the historical processes that in effect changed the second line of 13a into the first line of 13a. I guess we could have time to run through the forms in the right-hand column in B. All of them except the last are historical reconstructions. First, there was a parallelization process where the sequence KY became ch. In the form to the right of that, I underlined the result of that change. Then there was vowel syncope, a big thing in the language, by which various vowels within a word were dropped. Which vowels were dropped was a complicated matter, but in this case we can say that you ignore the initial clitic, like the hak in this case, and then drop the second vowel and what follows. Here is a vowel written with the letter I, and next to vowel syncope I underlined the consonant cluster, ch, b, that resulted from the loss of the vowel. After that, there was a process of coda weakening or lenition that had two effects here. It turned the K of the hak into an H, and it deaffricated the ch into a sh. And finally, an H that occurred between a vowel and any following two consonants was dropped, but there was pitch was raised on the preceding vowels, kind of compensation for that. And the result of all those changes is the final word in 13b, ahawash bosa, which corresponds to the first line in 13a.